You're watching the OFC Media. Today I'm going to be interviewing the creator of Enigmon. So how are you doing today?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited for this interview.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it.
This is going to be the first interview for the channel. And to start, I'm going to ask you, what is the reason that you wanted to create the game Enigmon?
I grew up with like the red and blue era of Pokemon. It's been like my favorite series for a long time. I played every generation from 1 to 9, and when I was a kid, I'd actually designed my own Fakemon, which would carry over into now my adulthood. I've always said, like, man, I wish my designs could be in an actual Pokemon game. So Enigmon is kind of the culmination of all those hours spent making my own creatures and mons, and now finally getting to do exactly that, putting them into a fully realized game of my own. So that's kind of the whole reason I started this whole thing.
That's really awesome because we have very similar backgrounds when it comes to why we decided to create our games.
Oh yeah, you're making a game as well, right?
Yes, and we even have a crossover.
Oh yeah, that's right. Where it was your those turtle burgers, right?
Yeah,
That was
yeah. Mine was the turtle, and you had like the Brainiacs line.
yep. Brainiacs, Maniacs, and Cerebrex were mine.
Yeah.
So
So
we
for
get to
those of you who don't know, we each allowed three of our monsters to appear in the other person's game. I'm pretty sure the audience wants to know what level of game development experience did you have before taking on this project?
absolutely none. I've never done game dev at all. I mean, I've spent the last several years refining this idea and piecing it all together, but as far as actual development experience, I have none. Um, I've just kind of been winging it ever since I decided to start this project. So I'm kind of learning as I go here.
That's good. I appreciate your honesty. So for anyone watching, you should definitely look up this person's website for Enigmon because they've managed to accomplish so much for someone that has no game development experience.
And speaking of the website, I actually did just update it. I still got some work to do on it, but we added a new page and some new music to there. So definitely check it out if you get a chance.
That is true that he recently did just update his website. I'm pretty sure people want to know what is your goal for the final product for Enigmon?
So probably obvious, but I would like to actually finish it, of course. But ultimately, the finished product would be exactly what I've envisioned in my head. A full region to explore, tons of battles, quests, mons to encounter, a whole storyline to experience, everything. And hopefully, if all goes well, 4 DLCs that would offer a continuation of that main story with new mons to see and more, all leading up to a sort of grand finale that would bring it all to a satisfying conclusion, or at least I hope it would.
Yeah, that's going to be a jam-packed game. And notice how he said one of the main goals is to complete the project. Some people might not know this, but for a lot of indie games, just completing your project is already a big enough challenge.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've learned going down this road. It's not easy.
Yeah, many game developers get started and then once they realize, oh, this is real, they might back out at that point. But some people continue and they complete their project. So, what are your inspirational sources for world building within Enigmon?
So pretty much everything that I've grown up with. So I grew up in not upstate, but downstate New York, and I lived there most of my life until I moved to Southwest Florida around 6 years ago in this August. Um, so a lot of the environments in the game will be heavily inspired by both places, complete with beaches, forests, snowy mountains, caves, that sort of thing. All the standard fare. And I really love fall, so I had to get that in there. So players can definitely expect to see a wide variety of environments covering different seasons and whatnot. Um, so as far as the lore of the game goes, though, it's kind of its own thing with sprinkles of real-world mythology thrown in. So it might be hard to see at first, but as you kind of adventure around, you'll see bits and pieces of that real-world mythology thrown in there.
What is the main problem and goal of the main character in Enigmon?
So we've got two main characters. Their names are Elle or Evan, depending on which gendered character you decide on. So they're college age, maybe around 25-ish or so. They're recruited by the professor as part of a required internship, which for them turns out to be catching these mons and discovering more about the region's history. And while things start off that way, as you progress, they begin to come into contact with the villainous Team Enigma, who are starting to get up to some kind of sinister plot involving drugging Enigmon to improve their combat abilities. So a little bit of a darker twist to what you might expect. The player character is also not silent protagonist either, which is very different from a lot of, a lot of these other indie Mon games. Typically, you have a quiet protagonist, but these guys are individuals who actually start off sarcastic and stubborn and will grow as people over the course of their journey, eventually becoming more well adjusted and changing their tune about being the professor's intern.
This is actually interesting because neither of us planned this or coordinated this, but both of our main characters actually speak. Like they're not a silent protagonist.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I was just surprised too when I'm hearing you say it.
Yeah, I thought a lot about that, and I was like, having a silent protagonist is great because you can impart yourself onto everything that's going on. But at the same time, I thought, why not have actual like characters that develop over the course of the story?
Yeah, because my logic and reasoning was that I felt like the silent protagonist, it happens a lot. So I'm like, okay, what if I did things differently? What if my character was more like, I guess, Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho, to where he just directly tells people things, and he's kind of like he has like a mouth on him.
Yeah, that's kind of how Al and Evan are going to be, initially, and then they'll start to develop to be more reasonable people as they progress.
You have character development in your story to where like they start one way and they change. In my game, it's a little different. I don't want to give out any spoilers, but yeah, it's a little different. I'll just say that. Do you have a favorite monster, if any, that you have created for your game Enigmon?
Not fair. You're going to make me pick out of 250 mons to pick a favorite?
Yeah, the audience is gonna want to know if you have a favorite. If you love them all equally, then that's fine too.
All right, fair enough. I do have a few favorites. So I'll go with my top three. So first one's got to be his name is Cruelahan. He's like a haunted suit of armor, wielding a sword and carrying around his disembodied pumpkin head. It's definitely one of my favorites. Definitely one of my best designs, I think, since he's based off the Headless Horseman and Doolahans. So he definitely embodies a more sinister and spooky aspect that I think you wouldn't expect from most Mon games like this. There's Frosquito. So a while back, I had spotted this like sprite of a mosquito mon. I really like the idea of it. So Frosquito has like this big snowman head as part of his body. And when designing him, I thought he could hide in snow piles resembling snowmen and then jump out at the player, almost like a Voltorb Electro type of thing where they mimic something else. And it's extra cool because there's a set of snowman mons too, so this guy's perfect for pulling off those type of surprises. And I love bug mons, so this one's kind of a no-brainer.
I like that concept because I don't think I've seen anyone do that, like the whole like snowman surprise thing in a monster taming game.
Yeah, like surprise mons have definitely been done before, but I think this is just a different twist on that same idea.
Exactly.
And then lastly, I think is going to be Crattery. So he's this cute little crab guy. He looks like a little like a light bulb, and he's got jumper cables for claws. So and he's a fun design because he's not a typical like water crab, but he still lives by the ocean. So he just like clamps down on foes and zaps them with his jumper cable claws. He's actually an electric and fighting type. So when I first designed him, I had tried like a 9-volt battery for his body shape, but I ultimately decided on a rounder body and the jumper cable claws, which I know I keep bringing up, but they're probably my favorite aspect.
What has been your main source of inspiration for your monster designs?
Much like the region itself, the Mons are just as diverse and as much inspired by the places I've lived. Well, most of them. Some are definitely outliers who probably don't fit, but I designed what I wanted, so I've had to make sure to include creatures who fit into one or both places that the region is based on. And you'll see that reflected in a few ways. For example, I've got an apple mon and I've also got an orange mon. So New York, the Big Apple, and Florida oranges, things like that. I think there's a sizable focus on both North and South in that respect, but you can expect to see a lot of different things in that regard.
That's nice. So you use the scenery of both locations where you grew up and use that as inspiration to design your monsters.
Correct. Both the scenery and just, things, areas that I've been in. For example, when I lived in New York, we had like this little apple orchard. It was like a crab apple orchard. And I remember looking at the little apples on the ground. They all were beaten up and bruised. So the two apple mons, Roddle and Grutrid, I love pun names, are designed based off that concept of like apples and zombies because it kind of fits.
Ah, yeah, I see like the rotten apple and it's a zombie.
Exactly.
That's really cool. What are your personal favorite monster taming games, if any?
So Pokemon for one, obviously. That's definitely been the biggest contributor to Enigmon's core design. But I have played Temtem, I've played Nexomon, and Cassette Beasts. which I'd definitely say the last one is a favorite of mine. But I think it's hard not to play favorites here because Pokemon is such a, massive series that it kind of just overshadows anything else that comes out, which is really unfortunate. But I've seen a lot of great ideas come from non-taming games. I hope this keeps expanding because there's so much room for just new things.
Exactly. I hope the community continues to grow.
I would love to see it, keep expanding and keep getting better. I mean, that things like Pal World I've played and that's been enjoyable. I mean, there's just so much room for improvement, so much room for variety in this community.
I agree with you 100%. I know what you mean. Will the game Enigmon bring anything new or innovative to the monster taming community? Something most players probably haven't experienced before.
So I will admit, I'm not exactly trying to reinvent the wheel here. I do think we pulled some great ideas from various places that, while they're not new, haven't necessarily been merged into a singular game either. So Pokemon, in my opinion, does a lot of things right, which I know might be a controversial take. But when it comes to gameplay, I definitely feel like it does a lot right. Though we all know it's not perfect. So I've tried to piece together some familiar systems with some tweaks that will ideally make for a more engaging experience.
That's a fair answer. That's a fair answer. And I do like how you said even if you took a concept that people are familiar with, you had your own spin on it.
Right. Like, for example, normally you'd just run into a mon, battle, catch it, or defeat it, right? So my thought was, what if we took that same encounter and spiced it up just a little bit? So you'll see with our system, you'd see the same scenario, but you'll notice that mon either has like an aggressive, neutral, or timid icon next to it. So you have to actually put some thought into what you're going to do. You could battle the mon, and sure, that'll work for aggressive mons, but if you do the same to a timid mon, it'll run for the hills. It'll run away like a coward. So you remember the Safari Zone in Pokemon? It's kind of like that, just a little less random. Perform the right action, you'll find success, either by battling or throwing a treat to distract it, that sort of thing. There's other little mechanics like that are just a teeny bit more, a little different than what you've already seen.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I feel like that will add an extra layer of interaction and experience for the player.
That's certainly what I'm hoping for.
What platforms will Enigmon be playable on?
So to start, probably just PC, probably on Steam, maybe the Microsoft and Epic Store. But at this point, it's kind of hard to say. I would like to see it end up on consoles in the future, but that'll kind of depend on funding and seeing how well everything ends up going.
That's perfectly understandable. A lot of the indie developers, they all start off on PC, most of them, and then they may or may not transfer over and get ported to consoles or mobile.
Right. I mean, I'm definitely hoping to, hit a wide market here, but, just PC to start with, and we'll kind of see how it goes.
Yeah. What is the expected price of the game?
So that's kind of a hard one to pin down right now. There's so much planned for the game, just even more than what I've talked about here. But getting everything in there will definitely take time, effort, and most importantly, money. And because of all that, I'd like to say we're planning on charging between 25 and $30, but it's not counting DLC. But for right now, I'm gonna have to leave this one as just a rough estimate.
Okay, so that's the rough estimate. And last question, what is the expected or estimated release year for the game?
So I'm hoping to at least have like a playable demo out by the end of this year, hopefully by December. But don't quote me on that. But to be honest, even that's not a guarantee right now. Ideally, getting the demo out by, the end of 2024, and then either releasing the game in 3 to 4 parts as early access, which I really don't want to do because of what we talked about earlier. Last thing I want to do is release an unfinished game because you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to get the full release out with DLC releasing several months after, hopefully by 2025, 2026. But right now it's still hard to pinpoint because we're still working on it. So I'm kind of speaking in hopefuls right now.
Yeah, I believe once the demo is out, you from the audience response, you'll have a good idea of how to continue from there.
Right. And we're hoping to put it on Kickstarter and see how that goes. Hopefully we get the funding. I mean, I don't want to overpromise, but I think that everything that we've talked about, we'll definitely be in there somewhere, some way. So, hoping.
Yeah. So this concludes our interview. I just interviewed the creator of Enigmon, and if you missed anything, you might need to rewind and watch it again. This person right here has managed to accomplish so much, this being their first major project. Definitely give the site a look. Definitely look into the information for Enigmon. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to subscribe and like and share. Find out what happens next time on the OFC.